right. All right. A.N.THROPOS here with another exciting episode of You Don't Know. You don't know, huh? So don't act like you do. Because then something bad might happen to you. And I'm talking to you. Oh!
However you want to roll on this.
Yeah, man. I'm just glad that you could join me. So we got Randy Maugans here on the show, and let me tell you, welcome to another exciting episode of You Don't Know. You don't know, huh? So don't act like you do. Because then something bad might happen to you. And I'm talking to you. Oh! On the show this evening, we have Randy Maugans, who needs no introduction to anyone in the truther community. I appreciate it, Jim. We had Jim, our piano man, there playing a little intro for us. Some soothing music.
Yeah.
Randy, what state are you in?
I'm in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Wow, we got a rich history there.
Oh, yeah.
Conspiracies.
It's the Keystone State, man. This is where they started all this shit.
That's right.
No, that's true. I mean, University of Pennsylvania is where they built the first computer. We've got bases up the ass here. All kinds of military stuff. I'm 110 miles outside of D.C. I'm wedged into the Northeast Corridor. I'm sitting here on top of 3 Mile Island, brother.
Whoa.
No, seriously, you can look out the window and you can see the stacks.
Are you serious? Wow, so things get a little hot there a few years ago.
A little radioactive, yeah.
How long have you been in Pennsylvania?
I grew up here.
Kick ass.
Yeah, I've left a couple times, but I always wind up coming back here because this is where my roots are.
It's very green up there, isn't it? I mean, you got trees everywhere, don't you?
I'm in the Appalachian Mountains, northern tier, what they call the Blue Mountains. And right now it is blooming like crazy. So this is pollen land. This is not just the sinus belt. My allergist tells me this is the buckle of the sinus belt.
Oh,
this is where all the trees just overnight they just open up and just bomb you with pollen.
Well, that being said, your voice sounds great. So
thanks. I'm glad because I'm breathing through one nostril.
All right. Probably not the first time you've done that.
No. We were taught to breathe a lot of ways, brother. Yeah.
Yeah. You had to survive and make it and perform through much worse, I'm sure.
Yep. Absolutely.
Randy, were you ever in the regular military?
No,
okay.
I was not.
Okay.
No.
And when did this start happening for you? Or maybe not when you realized that your life was maybe a little bit different from the other kids at school, but when in retrospect, looking back, you think it started being a little bit different.
Yeah, well, it goes in levels. So I started having like freaky UFO experiences, I guess you'd call them, when I was little. Like my first memories go back to about 3 years old. I recall contact with, we'll call them entities. Who knows where they came from. And not all of this was necessarily bad either. I had some major UFO, I will call them abductions, around the age of 11. That I recall those continued from, I would say, 11 until about the time that I was in my late teens. I had one last spectacular one, and then they kind of faded out. So that side of it was kind of ongoing. What I remember, and it's obviously a long trajectory regaining what glimmer of memories I have. Sometime when I was about 7 years old, I was tested extensively. And what my parents were told was that I had a high IQ. I think I tested around 170. And I was placed into, I used to be impressed by that too. I'm not. There's all kinds of intelligence, and the way they score intelligence, believe me, it's not impressive. It's all head shit. So I was in a program that began in, I will say, about third grade. Hello. That sounds like a very friendly dog.
Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. So you were in the program once they tested you?
Yeah, I was in what I understood was an accelerated learning program. It was actually, yeah, the acronym was PAL, which was Program for Accelerated Learning. We just knew the acronym. We were called PALs. Nice, friendly, smiley face on it. What it really was an umbrella program that probably sat under MK Ultra, and it was used to induct students in the programs based on giftedness testing. So one of the earliest memories I remember, and this was the anomaly that really triggered it for me because it sat there for so long. It took decades for it to kind of gel with me. I was placed in a room and tested by people who were, let's just say, suit and tie types. I don't remember military. I don't remember white coats. I remember people that had ties on, and at least one female. And that test was really strange because it involved a projection system that was throwing images at very high speeds. And the projector itself, the images are a separate issue. The projector stood out to me. And I thought back on this years later, and I thought, this was pre-computer era. This was 1960s, the early 70s when this was going on. So this would have been the 1960s. In the 1960s, we had, let's see, 8 millimeter, maybe super 8 millimeter film. We had overhead projectors, and we had blackboards and slides. That was it. That was media in that time. This device was probably about the size of a small, maybe 13-inch laptop computer with some kind of projection system that today you would understand would be liquid crystal display, light-emitting diodes, or plasma. In other words, it was fairly high resolution, and it didn't involve any type of visible media. There was no film, there was no overlays, there was nothing. They were simply bouncing these images, and they were bouncing them very fast. And the point of that testing was basically for us to be able to recall these images in sequence, firing these things probably 60 frames per second, based on, everything's subjective, because when you're a little kid, you don't have, but based on the rapidity of this was both very hypnotic, very rapid, and it was based on these symbols, sigils. Some of them I've seen in like my dream time, that I understand now are part of occult systems. And so there was that test was my first, probably the memory that stayed with me the longest. And as I got older, I kept going, what was that about? What were they trying to do? And I've talked to other people who have been in programs since who've given me a number of answers that essentially that was probably an early form of programming. At the same time, it was also probably them testing our ability to process very dense information very rapidly. So from there, I kind of have scattered memories of things. Some have come back to me. I have memories of being in what I believe you would call underground facilities. I'm trying to stay away from the word bases, but I know this is Bases, Texas, so, hi, y'all. The underground facilities where, again, there was a lot of testing being done. Some of those facilities I've psychically oriented to and recognized as being bases within the perimeter of this tri-state area, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland. One of them being the Aberdeen testing grounds in Maryland, which is also Edgewood Arsenal. And Edgewood Arsenal, when I hit on that, one of my hits was I was remote viewing, and I started getting a hit on a quantum computer there. So I'm probing this place, and I'm going, this place is really familiar to me. And it triggered a lot of memories. And so Aberdeen is a pretty interesting place because it's largely a gigantic, I guess, 380 square miles, almost all military. It's a town. It's a base. There's actually a number of bases there. It's very interesting because it has pardon me, allergies kicking in. It has access to its own island. It has access to a lighthouse. It has access to a confluence that goes directly into the Chesapeake Bay. And the schema of this, as I've come to understand it, and if I would have came prepared, I would have came prepared and given you some maps and charts of some things, because I've sat down and I've sketched this out. My understanding of this base is that this base is feeding off into a number of facilities that probably go right through the Northeast Corridor. Some of these underground passages are actually ancient labyrinths where probably our indigenous American people traveled underground. Some of them feed off into bases north and somewhat west of the Aberdeen area into the Appalachian Mountains, where there are also a number of underground bases. And the confluence itself going into the Chesapeake Bay, as I understand it, is rather strategic, the fact that they have an island there. And this is actually triangulated itself off of the fact that the Susquehanna River, and I referenced 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island sits on an island just to my very southeast here on the Susquehanna River. Susquehanna River feeds directly into the Chesapeake Bay, going right through that confluence area. So there's a number of base systems, water systems, underground tunnel systems, and very deep underground access systems that feed into this. Those are some of the things that I recall with some detail. And to say that, you go, when did you do that? And it's like, there is no when here. That's the thing about this. When you start to play with time and space in terms of experiences like this, and this goes, as you probably well know, even into the UFO thing, is that time and space are kind of suspended, dilated, contracted, however it needs to work. So my sense of timeliness is somewhat skewed.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So you mentioned that not all of your of these experiences with these entities, which some people say they're aliens. We're not sure what they are, but that they weren't all terrifying. Some of them had a positive aspect to it.
Yeah, the memories that I have of the ones that occurred early in my life were very favorable. I remember these entities as being teachers, trainers. You could liken this to maybe an angelic experience. I don't know. But I didn't sense malevolence in those beings at that time. Later on, it evolved into something a little bit more terrifying. The memory that I have from 3 years old largely goes into where I lived at the time. It's a very specific place and time because my parents were newlyweds. I was the firstborn child. There were no siblings at this point in time. And I very distinctly remember the room that I was in at that time. And when I go back into this memory, one of the things that is very consistent is the lighting in the room, the fixtures in the room, the furniture, the presence in that room, and then the sense that I had of being lifted out and basically going through a window, through a wall, basically on light. A total out-of-body experience at 3 years old. Okay. And that's an abiding memory that I have replayed in my head. It never varies. It's very real to me. It's emotional. I've gotten names of certain entities along the way that, are meaningful to me, that I believe these entities represented. So, to try and put this into a larger narrative, I don't know what that means, except that experience was some type of either preparation, training, or, astral out-of-body type. It's when the first time I ever saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind. If you remember that movie, it came out in 1979. I went to the theater. I saw that movie by myself, and I sat there and I had chills. I actually started to weep when I saw that movie. When I saw what Steven Spielberg put on the screen in that movie, and how much he revealed about the E.T. experience as we understand it.
Yes. Now, if I remember the movie correctly, and what we've been shown this whole time, it was that somebody in a quote-unquote alien abduction, that they're bodily taken up into this craft or whatever. But what you're telling me and what I'm hearing a lot is, so you feel like your 2-year-old physical body was still right there in the bed, but it was your astral, because you said an out-of-body experience. It was one of your subtle bodies that actually went up for this experience?
That's my sense, yeah. Yeah, I don't know where my physical was at that point in time. I can't speak to that in that experience. It's entirely possible that bodily I floated up, I floated out on light. My sense of it is that I could feel myself lifting up and going through this window. That window faced east. My house was at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. It was a tiny little tract house. These were houses they built in the late 1950s for people who were buying homes, people like my father on the GI Bill, young families starting out. And this was a very small community called Summerdale, Pennsylvania. Tiny little place. Still there. It sits at the foothills of the mountain. And that experience, it's singular. I had others like it. I don't have detailed memories. I had the sense that I did that a number of times. I had the sense that I had experiences with beings, and I had the sense that I interacted with them in a very meaningful way. All of it was done, there was no language. It was empathic, telepathic.
What did they look like?
They were surprisingly humanoid. They would be in the category of tall blondes, probably, what you call the Nordics. They were fair-skinned, light-haired, light-eyed people.
Could they have passed for a regular, normal person on the street?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny because years later, when I interviewed the late Bob Dean, he told me, he said, Bob understood kind of where I was coming from. We were kind of kindred souls, and Bob said to me, he goes, you could be sitting on a jetliner next to one and you wouldn't know. He said, they walk through the corridors of the Pentagon.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So, I mean, all that is alien is not strange looking, and all that walks on two legs is not human.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, these other children, in this PAL program with the gifted and talented kids, obviously you are the full deal. In other words, you had the mental, and the intelligence capacity, but also the physical ability. Were all the other children like that, or were some of them just gifted in the mental, or were they all physically fit as well? Or
my sense of it is that there's a wide variety. I am not, and I've had this conversation with a number of people. I am not a super soldier by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not a physical warrior. What I understand about myself is that, in all likelihood, I was tapped for my ability to comprehend concepts, my agility, not my strength, and my ability in balance and dexterity. One of the things I do still have, and it even sometimes kind of stuns me, is how quickly I can respond to something, just automatically. If a pen drops off this desk, I reach my hand out, I grab it in midair. There are just certain things that I have that are, you would say, highly developed. Certain types of visioning, certain types of being able to see, certain psychic skills, what we call remote viewing, psychic abilities. I think a lot of us were trained to use our abilities for remote viewing, military type remote viewing, using coordinates and things like that. Also, I think we were trained to navigate in some very specific ways that didn't require any type of mapping, compasses, GPS, or external systems. I believe that we were probably trained to navigate off of the Earth's magnetic grid. And that's just based on some memories I have of traversing terrain and tunnels where there was no external ability to navigate, nor were we given any maps. And we were basically plotted on courses and then set out to get to a certain point, and that we navigated, much like birds use the magnetic grid of the Earth, we were using that too. And I believe that's an innate sense that humans have that has been, it's been subsumed, but it's also been somewhat destroyed by the electrification grid.
oh yeah,
Ability to do that.
yeah, and
If you get out into, if you get out into the wild.
The lily wave that
John
they put
Lilly,
into our electricity.
exactly. Yep, exactly that. John Lilly's lily wave. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Well, he was describing that basically. He knew it got militarized.
Yeah, he didn't. A lot of times these guys have the best of intentions, but their inventions get weaponized.
Yeah. So, but one of the great issues that I have with alternative media, and one of the reasons why I don't talk about myself a lot, is because we have this thing that sits out there called the super soldier. And I know some of these people. I'm friends with some of them, and I've talked to a lot of them, and they're extraordinary people, and they're also extraordinarily damaged people because of the grueling, rigorous things that they were put through in order to be able to do the things that they do. I mean, those people are my heroes, because what they went through was extraordinary on top of extraordinary, just the physicality of it. But the super soldier is not the large body of, quote, product that came out of the MK Ultra programs. They basically were the tip of the spear, but what sat behind that were the psychic warriors, the people who were able to do the navigation, the people who were able to use psychic energy, the people who had the ability to go off in interdimensionality, the people who had the ability to do very intricate type encryption, decryption routines mentally, even technology skills. And this one of the things that I remember very distinctly. I was very comfortable with technology, and when computers appeared, computers to me were like totally familiar. I got it right away. I made my living off of it for a number of years, technology. And that's because all of our technology, what we use, what we see around us at any given time, and this is not a news flash by any means, this is all old technology. The military had flat screen laptop computers, they had mobile phones. Some of this goes back to the 40s. We would probably find out there are satellites predating Sputnik. The GPS system is land-based, so that probably was erected sometime either during or right after the Second World War. The technology that we have is what they developed and weaponized, and then they like to reward their friends in industry, so then they turn the patents into the wild, and they find front men like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and they get rewarded for marketing what is essentially, second-tier declassified military technology.
Yeah, you bet. I noticed something that really stood out is you said that the GPS system is land-based. Of course, this is something I've always believed because it doesn't work in the jungle. It doesn't work where there's no towers.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so is it solely land-based, or do you know, or?
I don't know that it's solely land-based. It's the basic system is land-based. It's transponder-based, and does not require a satellite system per se. But I don't poo-poo satellites. I just tell people when they tell you that something is in geosynchronous orbit, don't assume that that's sitting outside of the Earth's influence.
Right, like above the ionosphere or something like that.
I have a very strange cosmology because there's things I believe about the Earth based on what I know, what I sense, what I can articulate that doesn't fit standard models of the Earth. Mm-hmm. So my understanding of space is very different than what most people conceive. We talk about this on my show sometimes, that I don't conceive of space as being up and out there so much as both inside here and also something that is accessed through what is called the deep, and that basically when we access space through water.
We access space with what?
And that's
in water?
Through water.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit familiar with some of these concepts. And then, of course, the old occult philosophies that somehow the stars are within us somehow, I don't...
Yeah. So I think...
Did Neil Armstrong go to the moon? Physically?
Maybe.
But
where's the moon?
I have some serious doubts about that.
I have serious doubts about what we were shown about it.
Yeah.
I have very little doubt that we've had the capacity to reach the moon, but the moon itself is quite reachable.
Okay, next question is the moon 92,800 miles away?
Doubtful.
Yeah, it's probably maybe a lot closer to maybe 4,000 or something like that, or I don't know.
Yeah, this goes into the law of really big numbers. So, like, the proportional distance between what they call the planets, the sun, the moon, and all the other satellites is proportional. And that has to be because visually we can calculate things based on scale, but in terms of actual mileage, I'm finding it difficult to believe that my telescope actually is able to see the rings of Saturn at the distance they're claiming it is, given that I don't have the ability from where I am, even at a high altitude here, to be able to see Lake Erie. But based on what they're asking me to believe, I should be able to see very far. Now, obviously, atmospheric conditions will correct for semi-curvature of the atmosphere on this and make allowances that our ability to view what we view up there doesn't make sense in terms of the distances that we've been told.
It really doesn't, because I don't know what 93 million miles looks like.
Nobody does.
But I don't think it looks like when we look at the sun. I don't think that's 93 million miles.
No, nobody really does. And again, when I've gone back and looked at the numbers, and I'm not a mathematician, I'm not an astronomer, I'm not a physicist. But what I do understand is that the average person has no ability to conceptualize these very large numbers, and they count on that. They count on us not being able to process that amount of data. So everything else can square off of that.
Yeah, it's really, even 100,000 is really a hard kind of number to wrap your mind around. Even if somebody has $100,000, it's still kind of, that's right, kind of, it's hard to. Yeah. Well, and then also the number 93 is a little bit, because I'm in a little club where we address each other by that name, 93, and then of course there was the World Trade Center, the 911. Yep. I think one of those flights was 93, and so it's just kind
93.
of a lot of weird coincidences about that,
Yeah, they like to encode things numerically. They're very fond of that. That's actually a form of the ritual, as I'm sure you well know. The numerology behind it. So I'm not so interested in even having my theories proven right as challenging the dominant narrative. Yeah. And I will say this a lot. You can prove me wrong if you want to, but give me something solid. Because I'm going to challenge your logic, most of which is an internalized system. It's a system that's built on itself, on premises that are, at best, only given to us on faith.
That's
in other
right.
words, science is a faith-based system, largely.
Yeah,
it works.
Especially when it comes to cosmology and space and all this stuff. They've got all the facts they need to prove everything. The only problem I have is that all of the facts have one common source, and that's NASA.
Well, they have one common. Everything has been based on a Copernican, Newtonian universe. And then what happened was, we had Einstein. Nobody really understood what the hell Einstein was saying, but it sounded good. E equals mc squared, and special theories of relativity. The fact that you have a special theory of relativity tells me you've already made an exception for the rule that you just wrote up above. And when I was in 11th grade, because I was still actually in an accelerated program, in spite of the fact that I rarely went to school anymore. 11th grade, I took what was one of the first astrophysics courses taught. And I wound up getting through this course with probably C grades because I challenged the premises of what they were teaching. Because when we got to the place where we were talking about things like redshift and parallax theory and things like that, they then dropped in these formulas that were very elaborate and used what they called imaginary numbers. And I'm like, okay, so this formula says this, but what does that actually mean in real terms, and why are the numbers imaginary? And they said, well, because it's a substitutional system, and we build our theorems based on this, and it's modeling. We're basically modeling. And I'm going, so you're modeling, you haven't really finished the model though, right? And they're going, no, it's ongoing, but we know this. And I'm going, no, man, I don't think you really do know that. I think, and it was like after a while you just go, I think this is bullshit.
Yeah. And I'm not a big fan of Einstein. As far as I know, nobody's ever turned a screw or built an airplane or done anything with anything that Einstein has given us. No, nothing's ever been done with that, as far as I know.
So the thing is, we can take science, we can take hard science, we can take physics, chemistry, the hard sciences. We can use these because they are inside of the model. They work, they scale. Where they don't scale is where you have to then leap into the theoretical models. And this is my problem with theoretical mathematicians especially, is their theoretical models. If you've ever seen the TV series The Big Bang Theory, the Big Bang Theory is they've got this egghead guy named Sheldon, and he has a group of
Texas.
nerds. Yeah, he has a group of nerds he hangs out with. And Stephen Hawking's been on it, and well, when he was alive, if he was alive.
Yeah, if that was even him.
What a magnificent ruse that was. But they love to put these whiteboards up with all of these arcane symbols and stuff. And you look at that and you go, I know there are people that study this shit, but quite honestly, these are people that are intelligently stupid by nature. In other words, they have a system that they've internalized. Nothing that they do works inside of a real system. You can't, like you said, turn a screw, build a machine, do the practical things that we do that engineers and chemists do. All of that stuff works. It's a known system. The theoretical system or models that they have used to dazzle us, it's basically number magic. Yeah. And in a lot of cases, it's sigil magic. And they have created this arcane system, and they've used spells to build space around us and to create this system that is mystical. This is why I say that, on that level, science is a religion, and we believe what they tell us, and then they tell us a story, and we have NASA, which is, I've defined NASA as largely being, first off, an intelligence agency operation. Secondly, it is a pseudoscientific operation. And thirdly, it is probably one of the largest mass media distribution platforms on the earth.
Yes. And it was created by my great uncle.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. By the way.
Right.
Yeah.
No need to thank me. Yeah, it's a quagmire, and it's like you said, chemistry and all this stuff. This is something that has to work. They got to be able to make gasoline. They got to be able to do combustion and all this stuff. And even if there is a lot of stuff that's left out of physics and chemistry, in other words, that it's all like exothermic, or whatever, making explosions instead of implosions or whatever. There's still, some science to it, but then you get off into the other quote unquote sciences, like especially archaeology and anthropology, where it's just alive from beginning to finish. It's just, unless you go to Brigham Young University, where I think they teach more of the truth, and I'm not a Mormon, but apparently they've got a little bit of a different system there.
Yeah. Well, your mystical systems are actually closer to the real science than the hard science that they're teaching at some place like Carnegie Mellon.
Oh yeah, you bet.
Again, people have said to me when I called bullshit on the moon landing, and they said, well, how would you even get away with that? Look at NASA. Look at all the people involved with this. There are engineers and scientists and support technicians and telemetry and all of the ground support and the military. And I'm going, listen, everything's on levels. Everybody's on a need-to-know basis. Your job is done in a compartment. That's how government works. I know what it looks like from the inside. I know what it looks like in dealing with it in my adult life and business. And I understand that people have concepts about the jobs they perform that appears to be important and appears to be contributing to something, when in fact most of them are docile paper pushers or backroom technicians. How you contain something like this is again part of the magic. It's part of the spell. Because everybody's plugged into the same circuit board.
And there's only a small percentage of the humanity that will question these things. People like you and me, and we are just a tiny percentage of the the human organism is a very social animal, and they just want, they're going to stick together with what everybody else believes, or you're crazy or you're stupid, when that's not true. And yeah, and
it's consensus reality. They create
it really is
consensus reality.